Your mate, who is out every weekend, has just landed 3 graduate job offers. Meanwhile, your high-achieving flatmate keeps getting ghosted. It makes no sense. They had the same degree, similar grades, but only one of them is getting interviews. And that's because once you've hit the 2-1, most employers stop caring about grades. In this video, I'll explain the one thing all successful graduate holders have in common, the key element that convinced the recruiters to give them the job. My name is Mary. I'm a former strategy consultant and a Big Four auditor. For the past 12 years, I've helped students and young professionals figure out how to stand out and get the job. On this channel, I teach what I wish I knew as an undergrad: how to land a top grad job, no trial and error, no wasting time. So let's start with what your high-achieving flatmate got wrong. University and degree prestige only indicate that you've cleared an academic bar. It's a third-party confirmation that you're able to talk about the subject that you're studying and you have a good enough grades in the eyes of the university that has you. So yes, technically, if you go to Oxford, there is a perception that you've cleared a relatively higher academic bar compared to somebody else in another lower tier university. But at the end of the day, the employer needs to understand whether you will make them money or not. And the fact that you are strong enough academically is a really weak proxy on whether you're actually a money-making machine. Being good at a subject doesn't mean that you're good with clients, etc. And yes, some top employers do have target schools, but essentially that's a very weak definition, and usually anything in top 30, top 40 will make the cut if your CV is interesting enough. Your university is a nice tick, but it's not gonna get you the job on its own. Another thing that people tend to freak out about is the grades. But I already said, once you have that 2-1, grades don't matter as much, because the employers usually use it as a filter to get rid of anybody who scored below 2-1 and manage the massive volume of graduate job applicants that they have. This is essentially a relatively low hurdle you will need to clear to stand out as a top 40% applicant, roughly. And once you do that, the focus of the assessment shifts to your behavior and other experiences. Nobody looks at your grades or university after the initial stage. So if you do get to an interview stage, that means that your university and grades were considered good enough, and they're unlikely to feature as a big decision maker later on in the process. And overall academic success is yet another thing that you need to consider, but not think that it's too important. So bringing the grades and the university prestige together, I think you can work out that the academic success overall is not as important of a factor as you think it is. Most of the graduate schemes in the UK are degree agnostic, so you don't have to be a specialist in a subject in order for you to get the job, with the notable exceptions, of course, of law or medicine or some of the computer science programs. You can essentially walk into a Big Four, so accounting or consulting, with any sort of degree, whether it's music or engineering or finance. And even if you take a step back and you think about what excelling in academia means about you as a person, that means essentially that you're good at memory and some theory retention. It doesn't really have an aspect of real life experience for the most part. However, because employers are more concerned about what will make them money, the skills that they're looking for extend far beyond the academia. So if it's not the prestige or the grades or the university name, so what does actually matter? Simply put, skills. What do I mean by skills? Well, I break them down into 3 distinct types. On one hand, you have something called hard skills. They're very much binary. You either have them or you don't. Think about particular language that you speak, whether you can code or not, do you have a particular degree? These are usually quite easy to filter through, and they're called prerequisites. And because they're binary, they're usually used at the beginning of the application process to filter out the candidates that simply don't meet the criteria. If you have the skill, you move on to the next stage. If you don't, you get kicked out. However, because there are so many people that would meet the hard skill criteria, there are still too many candidates to make the decision on the hard skills alone. On the other hand, completely, you have the soft skills, and that's what makes you you. Are you a kind person? Do you act with integrity? Are you a highly motivated person? These are really difficult to define and measure sort of skills, and usually the employers would like a person who is kind and acts with integrity, but again, there is no reliable way of measuring it and then comparing all the different candidates on whether you're more kind than the other person. And so yeah, they try to do it again with some of the behavioral multiple choice questions that you might get in the beginning of application. How would you behave in this scenario? However, the recruiters are also very much aware that everybody is going to put their best foot forward and say, of course I will act with the top-notch integrity. So they don't place that much weight on those results either. So what skills actually matter then? Simply put, they're called transferable skills. These are the skills that you acquire in various environments that can be used in a variety of situations. Things like communication, leadership, teamwork, commercial awareness. You can acquire these skills through a variety of ways, but they are the most important ones. And the good news is for recruiters, these skills are the most important ones to the employer. Surprise, surprise, they're the most observable and testable, and that's why the whole recruitment process is designed around measuring whether you have those skills and how strong those skills are in you compared to other candidates. Think of transferable skills as business assets, because every single skill I listed can be tied either to the way a company makes money, saves money, or reduces risks. How good you are at problem solving might determine whether you'll be able to find a solution to a risky problem at work, or you come up with a solution for a client and they're happy and they keep hiring your firm. Whether or not you're a good communicator is important, because you might need to convince a client to stay for another year, or convince somebody in accounting to give you a more accurate report. And teamwork is about productivity. If you're not able to work in a team, you introduce friction, and therefore the whole team is unproductive, and unproductive teams tend to make less money. So the employer literally sees you as a collection of transferable skills, and they measure up how strong those skills are in you, and they measure, based on the stories you tell about your transferable skills, how likely are you to be a good hire, a good value add, and whether or not you're worth the investment. Because at the end of the day, not only are they going to spend salary money on you and the benefits money on you, they will also invest time and money into training and onboarding you. And so essentially, whenever they hire a person, they take on a risk. They basically say, I think this person, based on what I've seen, is good enough. They will take on more work and they will, in the long run, make me more money. So they're worth the investment. If you don't believe me, look at any graduate job description. They will usually have a section called what we're looking for, and look at every bullet. One bullet will be stating the hard skill prerequisites. Needs to have coding experience, or needs to speak a certain language, or needs to have a certain passport. That's not really a skill, but also a prerequisite. They will also have a bullet point around soft skills. Oh, you need to act with integrity and be kind and self-starter and blah, 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 blah. And then every other bullet point will be about transferable skills. Needs to act as a leader, needs to work well in a team, needs to be a great communicator, needs to have commercial awareness. That's because transferable skills are the most important ones. And I'm sure you all know the meme of, for the entry-level job, you require 10 years of working experience. Yes, it's funny, but working experience in that context is not really about working experience, it's about life experience. So if you don't have corporate experience, don't despair. You probably still have the transferable skills employers are looking for. And the secret is not where you got the transferable skills. The secret is how you talk about them, and can you paint a pretty enough picture on how strong your skills are. Quick note, I made a free checklist of the top 10 skills UK employers actually look for in graduates, plus a template to assess where you stand. Link is in the description. Recruitment process is literally designed around measuring your transferable skills first and foremost at every stage. If you think about it, at CV stage, you're talking about your experiences and how you demonstrated those transferable skills. At the interview stage, they want you to talk about your transferable skills, bring a bit more color to the situations that you described in your CV, or bring in some new examples. They're also testing for sincerity and whether you actually made stuff up or did you actually experience it. They're trying to get more and more data about what skills you have and how strong they are, because they also need to compare you to other candidates. This is usually done in the interviews by asking you what they call behavioral questions. So tell me about a time when you dealt with a challenge, where you worked in a team, when you led a team. This is all designed to measure transferable skills. And then in the assessment centers, you not only talk about the skills a bit more, you actually demonstrate them in real life with other candidates. Can you work under pressure? How do you work with people you barely know? How do you establish good communication patterns, and how you actually work in a team? Every single stage is about verifying your transferable skills and seeing if they stack up. And the more data the recruiters have on your transferable skills, the more comfortable they are about you as a candidate and legitimacy of your skill set. And that means that the hiring decision that they make will be as risk-free as possible. And this is where your mate with 3 offers stands out. He has the ultimate mega skill of being able to demonstrate his transferable skills effectively. How do you do that? Because saying that you have a skill is not good enough. Everybody claims that they're an excellent communicator and a wonderful team player. However, this is not good enough for recruiters. Trust me, bro, is not gonna cut it. Employers trust what you demonstrate, not what you declare. So you need to adjust your mindset. We're now talking about show, don't tell. Usually, being a good communicator means different things to different people. So what recruiters do, they collect stories and they measure it based on what you tell them. Remember, recruiters cannot infer any information. They can only take into account what you've told them. So you can think that you're the best communicator in the world. However, if you don't tell them the best story of you demonstrating that skill, that counts for nothing. And this is why it's important to choose the best stories that exemplify you having a particular transferable skill. Let's look at an example, a communication skill. Candidate 1 talks about how they were a society treasurer and how they worked with the rest of the committee to identify their needs and stay within budget throughout the year. Candidate 2 instead tells a story of how they worked as a waiter one summer, how they dealt with customer complaints, how they gathered feedback, and passed it on to the restaurant management. They also say that, based on all of the work that they did and problem solving that they did, they were able to improve the perception of the restaurant amongst the local community, and that resulted in higher than average customer reviews for the period. And the craziest thing? Objectively, candidate 1 might be a better communicator than a candidate 2, but because candidate 2's story is a lot more compelling and exemplifies more challenging situations where they were able to show their communication skill, the recruiter will probably think that candidate 2 is a better communicator. So now that we talk about demonstrating the transferable skill, what is the best experience to have to get that transferable skill? They're all equally legit. The source of the skill doesn't matter nearly as much as the way you talk about the skill. So where can you get those transferable skills? Well, essentially anywhere. You can be university societies, sports teams, volunteering, passion projects, even some personal stories. The circumstances of you acquiring a skill don't matter as much. It's the detail and the extent to which you explain the story that matters more. And yes, you might argue that the summer internship at a big corporate will be more impressive, but again, similar to university prestige, that is not really about being corporate. It's more about third-party validation. It tells the recruiter that some other company had you through their recruitment process and you came out on the other end. And also, everybody in corporate world knows that the interns don't actually do that much. They are more of an observer than a doer. So, the quality of the transferable skill is not higher just because they were in corporate. The source doesn't matter as much as the validity and the depth of the skill demonstrated. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my CV when I was an undergrad is just describing my responsibilities. Let's look at an example of a barista. 2 people might have exactly the same job title and work in exactly the same location. So the first person literally just showed up 9 to 5, did what they're told, made coffees, cleaned up after closing time, and nothing else. And second candidate might have done exactly the same things that were required of them as part of their job description, so making coffees and cleaning up. But on top of that, they also talked about how they identified a way to improve the onboarding process by creating a checklist and therefore reducing the time required to train new hires. So, same job, different candidates. So whenever you talk about a job experience that you have in your CV, you need to look beyond what your responsibilities were and into the things that you've learned and how you applied them and what the results were. This is only the foundation. In order for you to get the graduate job, you need to learn how to describe these experiences in your CV effectively and how to talk about them confidently in the interviews. And if you watched this far, it's clear that you care about doing this properly, and this is what this channel is all about. As this is my first video on the channel, I'll be covering all of these topics in the upcoming episodes, from CV bullet point writing to passing interviews and assessment centers, to actual job search strategies for university students. If there is anything specific you'd like me to cover, just leave a comment below. And if you don't want to miss what's coming next, make sure to hit subscribe. It's free and it will easily be the best career win you have this week. Make sure to like this video if you found it useful, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!